Marketing! Most aspiring indies know by now they need it to have a successful game, but many feel like they don't know how to do it. I've even seen memes like this, implying that marketing the game is harder than actually making the game. It seems like a lot of indies have this idea that discoverability is the only thing that stands in the way of their game being a top seller. They say to themselves, well, I know I can make a game. The problem is I just don't know how to market it. They lament the low success rate of indie games, and sometimes even feel like success is a dice roll of low odds, like some games just happen to go viral. My experience as a full-time indie dev with a small studio for over a decade couldn't be further from this. The way I see it, it's not that most indies fail to market their product, it's that most indies fail to make a product that is marketable. Their production value and scope are not competitive with the top of their genre, so all their marketing efforts gain no traction, and indeed they don't sell like the top of their genre. Now, I'm not just speaking from my gut. I'm a student of Steam. I've done actual extended research on this topic. I was one of the early ones to scrape Steam myself and analyze revenue trends in tags and genres. In fact, many have gone on to use my data set in their own marketing research tools, though I don't recommend it because there are much better data sets available now made by much smarter people. I browse GameStats.com for funsies, and I spelunk in the depths of Steam every day in all revenue brackets. It's a bit of a weird hobby of mine. I'm also a reasonably successful indie myself, having shipped a top seller, and currently in production on a game that will likely mop the floor with our last sitting at over 80,000 pre-launch wish lists, no festivals. So I like to think that I have some credibility here. And I'm telling you, if you want to make and sell games for a living, you've got to know what the quality benchmark is. You've got to know what kinds of things are selling in your genre. Most aspiring indies make the mistake of only having what I'd call a very consumer-level knowledge of their genre. They really only know about the top handful of titles. Very often I see a gamer or developer thinking a particular game is a hidden gem, when usually it's a top seller. You've got to know about more than that. You've got to know about the mid-tier successes too, and the failures as well. You've got to know what a $1 million revenue game looks like, as well as a $100,000 game, and just exactly how good a game can look and still make practically nothing. You've got to develop an intuition for what a mid-tier success looks like in your genre, so you can make good decisions about the viability of your own product. Let's learn how to find your quality benchmark for your genre. So, here I'm on GameStats.com, which is a site that uses review count to estimate revenue. This is the most common way of estimating revenue with Steam, and I feel it's perfectly accurate enough for market research. Hot tip, if you want to game dev on easy mode, make a game in a tag with a high median revenue. And if you want to game dev on hard mode, make a game in a tag with a low median revenue, or even better, use these percentage in revenue bracket stats. The choice of what kind of game you make is hands down the most important marketing decision about your game, and obviously it happens before you even start production. Pick a tag that you feel represents your game, or you can even cross a few tags together. I like to filter out stuff that was released more than, say, 3 years ago, because the market is always changing. Next, you want to pick the revenue range you would need to call your game a success. Now here's your list of competition. I'm not going to spotlight any unsuspecting games here, but you should spend some serious time researching these titles. Look at their trailers and screenshots. Look at the quality of their product, the graphics, the art style, the UIs, the performance, the features, the scope, the content, the reviews. Better yet, buy the game and play it for a few hours. Ideally, you want every single aspect of your game to be competitive with the best looking titles in your revenue bracket. Don't just find a title that snuck in there somehow and use that as your benchmark and hope that might do. If you want to sell like these games, you have to hang with these games for realsies. Alright, now this part is really motivating to me. Trust me when I say, I have not found a lot of hidden gems, quote unquote, on Steam. I have not found many games that looked like they should have been in a higher revenue bracket based on their apparent production value at first glance. Maybe I find a game that I feel like maybe it should have grossed $1 million and ended up grossing $300,000, but never do I find a game that looks like it should have grossed $1 million and it only grossed $200. I find the opposite actually all the time. Games that I just can't even believe how much money they made. So now that you know how to do market research, let me go back to the topic of how difficult it is to market an indie game. I cannot express to you how much easier marketing becomes when you have a product that interests people at first glance. And I cannot express to you how impossible marketing becomes when you have a product short of that. It's the difference between everything you try working to some degree and sometimes working spectacularly versus everything you try getting close to zero engagement and being a complete waste of time. Now, we've all heard of games that look fairly unremarkable at first glance, but somehow manage to go viral anyway. I'm talking about your Among Us's, your Vampire Survivors, maybe even like Undertale from the last era. Now, I'm not saying those are bad games, obviously they're fantastic games, but it's not immediately obvious they're cut above some of the lower performing titles, mostly due to their graphics, art styles, and apparent production values. If that's the kind of success you're shooting for, then I've got nothing to say about that. I don't know anything about how to reproduce that kind of success. To my mind, it's like lightning in a bottle, and very difficult to reproduce reliably. I see those games as cultural phenomenons, but I'm here to tell you that that is not the common kind of success in the world of premium games. Steam has a veritable ocean of games that most gamers have never heard of, making hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. The majority of those games don't look like Among Us. They're polished-looking games with strong art styles and solid production values, well-executed products that have found their market. They're often made by studios with some experience, but not always, and usually did a reasonable marketing campaign, but not necessarily any viral posts or mainstream coverage. Sometimes they have a unique selling point, but honestly, sometimes they don't. They're just a solid title backed by commercially serious production competency and effort in a high-demand genre on Steam. I feel really strongly about this. The reliable way of selling like the top of a genre is to compete on every level like the top of the genre. Ignore the outliers and giga hits. Find the revenue bracket you want to be in and start doing case studies on games that sell like that. If you do find a game that presents better than yours in numerous different ways and it's underperforming your desired revenue bracket, that should scare you. Now, I'm not saying marketing doesn't matter. Clearly it does, and virtually every company willing to put substantial capital in their game would be foolish for not honoring the product with a marketing campaign worthy of the production budget. But the idea that marketing is the main thing missing from most indie efforts, or that the only reason something like Cyberpunk 2077 sells like hotcakes is because of the AAA marketing machine, well, that's just not true. So when you're analyzing games, by all means, size up the scope of their marketing efforts. Check out all their marketing assets, look at their store copy, track down their social media accounts and see what posts they made. What kind of beats did they have? Did they have a big announcement? Did they do any content marketing? And if so, what kind and how much did they produce? Lastly, look for any existing brand equity that they may have already had, and take that into account when considering their revenue. Okay. So I said to sell like the top of a genre, you've got to compete on every level with games in the top of that genre. I actually find this fact liberating. The games market is largely still rational, in that if you build something substantial, it's likely you can compete. If your product can hang with the top of your genre on every level, and I mean every level. When people think quality of product, they usually think gameplay, but I'm talking about everything. Graphics and trailers matter, okay? They're not just window dressing. They're the first sign of quality a player can see when they first lay eyes on your game. If it looks like a student project, people are going to assume all the parts of your game are like a student project. But if you can hit the quality benchmark on every facet, it's more likely than not that you can sell like the top of your genre. The quality bar is sitting right there in front of us. If you want to sell games, analyze the games in your desired revenue bracket and make sure to compete with them on every level.